Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. I'm Brian Easton, author of the Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series. This is the Werewolf Bar, and this is the Creature of the Night. Once again, I'm tapping into the Jamesons, although this time not necessarily because St. Patrick's Day was this month, but for reasons which will become clear in a few minutes. Now, if you watch this show at all, you know by now that behind the concept of werewolf hunting, there's a larger idea at work: monster hunting. I'm talking about, and I have great affection for this subgenre. I'm talking about the human folks with the human flaws and foibles who are either brave enough or crazy enough to take a stand against creatures that can kill most people with their breath. This is especially true, the breath part, from a movie that I watched just last night, again, called Reign of Fire, which of course pits an all but extinct human race against the dragons that have pretty well destroyed the world. Matthew McConaughey's character, Van Zandt, is one of my favorite post-apocalyptic monster hunters. If you haven't seen the movie, check it out. It's a fun movie to watch. Now, we went over a lot of this in some of the early episodes last year when we talked about monster hunters and people who had kind of inspired SLJ. Abraham Van Helsing and the Crew of Light, Captain Ahab, Father Merrin from The Exorcist, Sarah Connors. Flesh and blood, human beings who either choose or are forced to stand in the gap between monsters and their victims and risk their life, and in some cases their souls, to hold that line by whatever means necessary. Now, pretty much everyone I just named has contributed something to the concept and creation of Sylvester Logan James, SLJ. And a number of people that I didn't just name also played that part. For some obvious reasons, I think Quincy P. Morris from Dracula is one of my favorite monster hunters of all times. But I have another favorite monster hunter that may not be so obvious. I'm talking about Carl Kolchak, the Night Stalker. Carl Kolchak is a reporter for the Chicago branch of the Independent News Service, which is a small news wire. And it was a TV movie first on ABC, later became a series, and it ran in the mid-70s, 74 and 75, I think. And it influenced a whole generation of horror fans who came to love Darren McGavin, who played Carl Kolchak, as the intrepid investigator that nobody believes when he comes up against the things that go bump in the night. But it's been a cult favorite for years. It's complete with its own social media groups, comic books, novels, and a whole bevy of aftermarket fan-made merchandise. But it was Carl Kolchak, along with possibly the Scooby-Doo gang, who sort of blazed the trail for future Monster Hunter shows, like The X-Files or Supernatural, which have in turn helped pave the way for shows like Penny Dreadful and even The Witcher. Good old Carl investigated weird crimes that the police didn't want to follow up on, the culprit of which was typically a monster of one stripe or another. And I watched this show religiously as a young man back in the day, and after all these years, I have to say it holds up pretty well, with some intriguing plots, well-told stories, and some great acting, especially by McGavin, who some of you might know better as the old man in A Christmas Story. So to Carl Kolchak, may your 66 Mustang never need repair. We have a special segment for you tonight featuring one of YouTube's favorite unorthodox outdoor show hosts, Derek Tex Grebner from Tex Grebner Outdoors. Tex is a man of many parts. Not only is he an accomplished hunter and tracker and a weapons man, but he's also well versed in werewolf legend and lore and has been a reader of the Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series since the first book was called When the Autumn Moon is Bright. So if there's someone better qualified to discuss werewolf weaponry, you send him my way, okay? Here's Tex Grebner sharing some thoughts on whiskey, werewolves, and the tools of the trade.
Well, we're in the midst of the corona panic, so I'm actually going to go very sparingly on my whiskey here. But my favorite whiskey is the Bushmills Red Label, which tastes about like if they bottled wild turkey in Ireland. I normally like my Catholic whiskey, mind you, in 3 fingers to 2 fingers of soda water. That way I get equally hydrated as hammered, and I can ride the buzz with a little bit of fizz. Aaron Gabra, especially because we're right here next to St. Patrick's Day while I'm actually filming this. But the reason that I bring up that it's Catholic whiskey is because Mr. Easton, in the past at the Werewolf bar, has actually done Protestant whiskey, which is Jameson. And I always give him a little bit of crap about his Protestant whiskey. And I bring up the Catholic whiskey because I was born and raised Roman Catholic. And I also have a very long background in werewolf mythology. And obviously, you can see here I actually have a monster target of the Wolfman. So it has always puzzled me, assuming that real flesh and blood transforming werewolves don't exist. I mean, 99% chance there. But I always was wondering what the origin of the silver bullet myth might be. Especially because, theoretically speaking, metaphysically speaking, maybe, this would be a spiritual affliction, a all-loving, all-forgiving God, the Christian God, in theory, could remove this sin if someone simply asks for forgiveness, theoretically speaking. But where does the silver bullet come in? And so, because it would be a spiritual affliction, and one of the main sticking points between the Pope and Martin Luther was people buying forgiveness for their sins, back in the day, the round ball molds would have been huge in the infancy of firearms. So assuming that somebody has rapacious and lycanthropic sins, it stands to reason that if someone could come up with enough silver to fill up a bullet mold, they could take that to the bishop and then buy forgiveness. True love will break the werewolf curse. And I think that that goes back to the loup-garou mythology, where in order to cure a loup-garou, the French werewolf, you would cut on the face rather than stabbing in the heart. Now, the stab to the heart would kill, but you would have to be willing to sacrifice yourself to essentially count coup by being able to put a cut on the face of the werewolf rather than put the knife or sword or pike into the heart. Now, in the interest of the autobiography of a werewolf hunter, I have an original Autumn Moon copy and an original Heart of Scars copy. And so it always seemed to me that while Mr. Easton has created ballistically comparable custom-loaded ammunition in his universe, that in the very beginning of the autobiography of a werewolf hunter, when SLJ is sitting at the table across from Michael, and Michael is wiping Foster James' blood off the Henry, and he is playing with these strange paper cases, which are the 44 rimfire, that they would have been paper patched bullets with a brass case, a paper wrapping around the silver bullet to build it up to actually bite the rifling like a sabot shotgun slug, because at this point the Henry is ancient. And so the rifling would have been chewed out. And so by making a paper-wrapped sabot that would allow the rifling to be protected from the silver. And so me personally, I would have armed SLJ with a 32 Special Winchester 94 as opposed to a 30-30 Winchester 94 in Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter, because that would have made it much easier, in theory, to create an accurate silver bullet, in the sense of being able to take a 30-30 bullet, and because 32 Winchester is the same casing but necked out a little bit further for a 32 caliber, because a 32 Winchester Special is a black powder to smokeless powder transitional cartridge, that would allow for Sylvester to have taken 30 caliber projectiles, patched them up to .32 with wrapping paper around them before he loaded them, and then firing them very accurately out of, or comparatively accurately, out of the 32 Winchester Special lever action. Of course, obviously, as we know, Mr. Easton has created his own universe with Michael's absolute mastery of physics, but I am interested to see how things come out in the Winter Fox book set in World War I, because if I had to do it, I would take a 220 grain, which would be the bullet weight, a 220 grain caliber 30 US 1906 bullet mold, and Michael theoretically would be armed with a .303 British Lee Enfield, which means that it is possible to take the 220 grain 30-06 caliber and have a much heavier silver bullet that would be ballistically comparable to Lee Enfield 303 projectile, throw a paper patch around it, and have Michael be able to make 303 bullets of silver in the trenches while he's in Europe on his hunt for Lucane. At least that's theoretically how I would do it. Whether or not that's going to be a plot point, that remains to be seen. Of course, possible spoiler alert here. And I'm super excited to see how the Winter Fox journals actually come out by the time that they're done, because I'm really hoping that we see Laughing Dog's rifle again. The Winchester, not the Henry. I am so hoping, especially because, again, in theory, Laughing Dog's rifle would have been a 1876 Winchester, which would be a 45-75, which is a 50 caliber cartridge necked down to a 45 caliber cartridge, which would then allow it to theoretically be the Sikh's Winchester in the Dara gun market that could have been Laughing Dog's original rifle. But we'll just have to wait and see. I'm just basically fan-fictioning headcanon here for the Winter Fox journals.
Thanks, Tex, for sharing that with us. He does have some interesting points and suggestions. I especially appreciated the idea of purchasing indulgences to be put on a silver bullet, where the bullet would slay the beast because it's silver and yet absolve its sins because it was purchased from the Vatican and would save its soul. It's a pretty cool concept. And I will definitely be taking some of his guns and ammo ideas under advisement, especially as we take Winter Fox into the trenches of the Great War. Now, as for the Catholic Protestant whiskey discussion, a lot of people associate Jameson's as the Catholic whiskey and Bushmills as the Protestant, not vice versa, like Tex had indicated. And that's because of where they're each made. Jameson comes from Dublin in the Republic, which is, of course, mostly Catholic, and Bushmills is distilled in Northern Ireland, which is largely not. So I broached the subject with Tex, and his rationale is that Jameson has the family crest on its bottle because the Jamesons were part of the Protestant gentry. Bushmills, on the other hand, he said, resides above the Protestant line, but it has no crest or coat of arms on its bottle because the Catholics couldn't own land, wear tartans, or have a coat of arms since 1607 and the Flight of Earls. So if you think he got the two confused there, he did not. He's just not judging the two by geography. And that's a lot of religion, politics, history, and whiskey all rolled up into one. Thanks again to Tex Grebner for being with us again tonight. And be sure to check out his YouTube channel, his Facebook page, and his website. Well, hey, that's going to do it for us at the Werewolf Bar tonight. Glad you could visit with us a while. And before you go, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can find us on the web at www.werewolfhunter.com. So until next time, Monster Hunters, happy hunting and mind the moon.